Steve Picataggio is a professional drummer and educator based in New York City, originally from Coral Springs, Florida. With a foundation in classical percussion and big band jazz, he studied under renowned drummer Danny Gottlieb and later pursued his master's degree in jazz performance at NYU under Billy Drummond. Steve has performed at iconic venues such as the Blue Note, Birdland, and 54 Below. He's also toured nationally with groups like the Hot Sardines. Known for his versatility, he collaborates with jazz artists, Broadway performers, and cabaret acts. He's currently the drummer for Four Phantoms in concert, and we're looking forward to certainly catching up today. So, Steve, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Abe. It's been several years since I've seen you.
It,
Yeah, it's good
it,
to see
it,
you, man.
it's been too long, but you look great, and I know you've been doing so much. We started working together well over 10 years ago, and I
Yes.
know much has happened since. So, kind of talk to me about. Let me know what happened in 2024, any highlights and stuff like that. I'd love to hear what last year brought for you and what's coming up this year.
Sure. Yeah, last year was really cool. I have been traveling a lot. I've been on the road here and there, a couple days at a time with a group called Four Phantoms, which is basically like a cabaret gig on stage. And the highlight of that, other than just playing with that group for 3 solid years, is that we filmed a concert for PBS, which was really cool. It was like, especially as like a young musician, uh, in high school, and you watch all these PBS specials, you're like, man, it'd be cool to be on one of those one day. So it's out now. There's also like they recorded the concert for like an album and stuff. So it's been kind of that's definitely for sure been the highlight. Yeah.
Can people stream that on Amazon if they wanted to, or is it something you just
I
have to go to pbs.com for?
I think it's one of those like you have to log into PBS and it's like their big the fundraiser. I don't know if they're still giving out tote bags like they used to, but it was like the big fundraiser concert. But the album itself I think is on like on streaming and all the usual spots. Yeah.
No, Steve, it's so good to hear you're doing so many things, like not just playing quote unquote jazz, but you've been open to doing all these other, shows and everything like that. Did you think that once you got to New York that your career would have been as versatile as it is, or did you kind of think, you were just going to be playing jazz if you were to look back?
I kind of always wanted it to look this way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I moved to New York, I wanted to be on Broadway and in jazz clubs and kind of everything in between. When you go to music school, as you know, you kind of could, have a hard time expressing those other interests as a musician. And also, maybe there's just not enough time in your own space to think about other things other than I have to get my time together and I have to know all these tunes and I have big band rehearsal and all those things. But um, kind of midway through college in my undergrad in Florida, I started to feel like, oh, there's like a nice community theater scene, and I started doing the shows there. Um, and then when I moved to New York, it was like right back to the jazz thing.
Lugging your
Mostly
drums
self
on the cart.
yeah, as you know, man. I mean, I had all of some of my first gigs were with you, taking my drums down in the West Village, and you know, uh, carrying my drums on the train and all that stuff. But I think also too, like the second I got to New York, it was like, let me see what the Vanguard's like. Let me hear all these musicians play live for the first time, and I put the musical theater thing to the side, but just flashing back to like high school, I only did classical percussion and musical theater. That's all. I mean, I played in the jazz band and I loved it, but I really played more shows than anything else. So,
Well, playing in jazz band in high school is much different than playing straight ahead jazz with a piano trio or something.
right, for sure.
So talk to me a little bit about the first time you ever did a jazz gig in like a trio setting, because like it's a complete 180 from playing in a big band or something. Do you remember that
Right.
first jazz gig you did? I assume it was in Florida.
It was in Florida. It was with a saxophone player friend of mine that, had like trio gig or a quartet gig at like a retirement home, and we just played tunes. And it was kind of interesting to think like, oh, I know how to play jazz, and then you like, let's play Bye Bye Blackbird, or let's play any standard, and you're like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, play time, but that was a really good first lesson in.
That was during
Uh,
undergrad?
this was in high school. This was
Oh, okay,
like
yeah.
freshman, sophomore year of high school, where it's like, how do you do anything other than just play the big band chart that was put in front of you? Yeah.
So did you kind of have to go just start listening to records? Did you have a teacher who could like
Mm.
kind of transition you from playing that way into playing more straight ahead?
Yeah, I got really serious about being a musician sophomore year of high school. That's when it was like the light bulb went off, and I knew it's what I wanted to do. I had a really amazing percussion teacher, Sergio Carreño, who's percussionist in the Oregon Symphony. So I studied classical percussion with him. But it was also like life stuff. It was also just I told him I wanted to do this for a career, and it was really he really got me in the mindset of like, okay, if you want to do this, these are the things to consider.
But
And then
was it
my
being around him or was it, you said a light bulb went off. What was it
yeah.
exactly that sparked it? Something has to happen to us, I think.
Well, for sure. A lot of it was I really wasn't putting much energy into anything else. And I love sports, and then I love this and I love that, and it was really like, oh, but the drums just stuck. And I realized, and I've said this before, but I realized like the more energy I put into the drums, the more it just made my life better. Like all the things around me better. My confidence, my grades, just like my overall clarity of like who I wanted to be as a human being. It all was kind of driven by just like, oh, if I like sit in the practice room and I actually like, put some real focus and attention into this instrument, wow, look at beyond just a good time feel or a good understanding of music. It's doing all these other things. And then on top of that, seeing my teacher Sergio, and then my assistant band director, his name's Brian Wesolowski. He was sophomore and junior year. He was the assistant director, and he was a big jazz guy. And just watching the two of them, who I don't even know. They're not like that much older than me, but at the time I was like, well, they're out there doing it. They're professionals. They're like, if I could have a life like that, teaching a lot, playing a lot, then that's the dream. You know what I mean? So it was partially, self-motivation, and then also just really inspired by those two mentors for sure.
No, that's such a healthy environment to be in when you decide you're going to do this. And that's probably why, I mean, even I remember, when we used to play together, you definitely had, that's a certain joy about your playing and like a great time feel, which was you have to come from be coming from a good place
Yeah.
in life. So I think that probably makes a lot of sense now that we're talking about it. So correct, you said teaching is going to be something you're going to be doing also. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're also on faculty at a college, right? Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah. I'm on faculty at Texas A&M Kingsville, in South Texas, and I teach remotely. I have last semester I had six students. Six. One was a saxophone player who wanted to learn drums, so it was. But other than that, I had five drum set majors who are studying, jazz performance in Texas. Some of my students have graduated and moved on to like, go get their masters at, bigger schools, and out like doing the thing, which is cool to be on that side of things. But
Was that the
yeah,
Texas
it's
like
all
A&M
remote.
Aggies? That's the Aggies, but just another campus, or is it like a
It's
different?
another campus. Yeah. So like most like Texas is one of those states where like I think California is too, where it's like there's several different, you know, locations. Like I know in Florida where I grew up, it's like the University of Florida, Florida State University, et cetera, et cetera. But like it's like Texas A&M, you know, wherever. So this is Kingsville is like South Texas, kind of border town Texas. Um, and I've been down there once. It's a cool area, small town, but the program itself is amazing. It's the kids are working really hard, and everyone I talk to is just really hungry to get better. So it's like great as it's, that's the kind of student I was. I was just hungry to be around the people who had the information,
Yeah.
you know.
That's so great. You're
And
doing it remote too. You don't have to go fly to Texas every week
oh,
or
it's
something.
great. It's
Can
great.
you
Oh, every
imagine that?
week. Yeah, that'd be tough. Yeah, that'd be tough. But yeah, it's great. Like I teach like from this space that we're in right now. And they're in their music building, so they have all the resources they need. And I teach during the daytime, in New York City. Like if I have a cymbal or some brushes out, like my neighbors know I'm a musician, so it's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So how did so they were cool with that? They're like, yeah, you can have this job and do a remote. That's cool with us.
Yeah, I got the gig. This is maybe my third or fourth year. So at the time, like the remote thing was still kind of happening. So it was advertised as like a remote gig, and it's working. I mean, it seems to be just fine. Like
No, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it's great. I mean, there's times where I was like, if I was just in the room, I would just like tweak this little thing or here and there. But for the most part, it's like the kids are, you know, really fantastic. And I try to make myself available to them a little bit more, not being there, feeling like they're being supported. I know for me, like in college, like when I study with Danny or Billy or any of my teachers, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna be out on the road for a week." I'd be like, "Great, I could practice for a week." When you come back, you're gonna be like, hopefully, you got some cool stories to tell me. You're gonna be like, hungrier to coming back from wherever you were coming from. And uh, so I try to kind of offer that same kind of energy.
Yeah, and that's great you mentioned Billy too, because I know he was a really important figure for you when you were
Mm.
studying the music and everything. So probably without Billy, you wouldn't be, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
he's the master, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
Did you study with him too when
I
you were at
didn't study
school?
with him. No,
Okay.
I mean, I always saw him around and stuff, but didn't study with him. So, talk to me about learning from Billy and how he
Mm.
shaped everything you do, even with teaching, maybe he might have shaped
Mm.
some things.
Yeah, I went to NYU to study with him. So I spent 2 years, 4 semesters studying just with Billy, in terms of drum lessons. And I I mean, it just completely changed my whole life because first of all, he was like the perfect teacher to study with, moving from Florida to New York and, doing a master's degree where I had just studied 4 years with Danny Gottlieb, and it was all, Joe Morello stuff, technique, hand technique, and real dialed in specific stuff in that way. And Billy was kind of that next, like, how do I turn all of this into me, you know? He used to say a lot of things like, if you're playing an 8 bar solo, that's your space. That's your time to do whatever you want, whatever you need in that moment. Of course, based on extensive research and history and practicing and technique. But he really came about it in a really musical way first. So I play all these like Wilcoxon solos, rudimental technique stuff for him all the time. He's like, yeah, it sounds good. Now play like 8 bars in the style of, or in this, with the sound of that in mind, not necessarily verbatim. And I would sound terrible. You know what I mean? And so he's like, all right, let's figure this out. So he really helped, bridge that gap. And I think about him every time I play. I'm just thinking, I'll play something. And, I don't think there was definitely a moment where I was like trying to sound just like Billy. It's hard not to. It's so extensive. But, um, I'm always like, anytime I play, I'm like, oh yeah, that was kind of the thing from Billy. That was the thing
Well, no,
from
I mean, I
Billy.
remember the first time I heard him on a record, I was like, who the hell is this? This
I
is,
know,
you
I
know what I
know.
mean? So I get it. Like, it's not like, oh, you're listening to the record. You're like, yeah, like, I'm like, who is this drummer?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool because like he could be so many different things, within even just within the style of jazz, but like Billy Drummond is not just one thing. And I try to really keep that in mind when I'm outside of the world of jazz, like you have to be you always, and that's probably the biggest lesson I got from him is just be confident with who you are,
Yeah.
you know.
Everyone I'm talking to on the podcast, like a lot of the successful, guests or successful educators, it's always been about that, be you.
Be you.
That's one of the
Yeah.
most important things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and who are you really? How do you kind of discover that without going back and really taking everybody before you? The BU is not that cool if you don't really know about anybody else. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's the other thing too, is like how can you sound like everybody knowing that no matter what, you're ultimately going to sound like yourself. Like I can't sound like Max Roach as much as I try to, you know. Um,
Do you remember your first gig in New York?
I do remember my first gig in New York. It was at a cafe in Tribeca, where on the way to the gig, I learned what Tribeca means. So that was cool. It was maybe like September, October. I had moved to New York in August. So I was like, oh, cool. A couple months in, getting my first gig. It was like a little restaurant gig. And it was with a trombone player named Nick Grinder, who I also went to school with. He's doing great. He's also on a bunch of Broadway shows and is doing the thing. Um, and it was a little restaurant gig. I thought it was the most important thing I've ever done in my life, up until that moment. And in a
Yeah.
lot of ways it was because I had to take my drums on the train and I had to get there and I had to like know how to, play in the room and um it was great. It was so much fun.
Yeah, well, too, you and I were both, much younger then also. And it was a time where I guess there was just more of a outlook on if you're a young person and you want to play, you got to get out there just to gain the experience of being in front of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you have to like be willing to do all kinds of things. Like, you know, of course we don't want to play for free, but I mean, I those first 2 years in New York while I
Oh
was in
yeah, man.
school,
I mean,
I
yeah.
played so many free gigs. Just, I mean, the amount of lessons you learn and the amount of opportunity you get just by being out.
I think, now that as I've been reflecting back on it, like, like when I go to play now, like at any gigs, like I'm never really like nervous,
Mm,
like ever. Like I'm not like where I'm talking. I'm not. I mean, maybe I might get a little excited or like a tiny bit anxious, but I'm
yeah,
never like my heart's never like going like this. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure.
And I think if I hadn't done like I just learned how to like my just learned how to do it by just doing all that free shit because
Yeah,
just being in the space in front of people with your instrument is scary at first.
yeah, and I don't think like somebody walks into a cafe or a club or anywhere where there's music happening and they go, "Is this band playing for free?" They don't care. You got to play. You're playing for people. You got
Yeah.
to play music. Obviously those you kind of move on or graduate from those types of things. But without it, it's such a huge, for me at least, in my experience, it was such a huge stepping stone for, I mean, just getting it together.
Yeah. No, I mean I wouldn't trade those things for anything because just, because just there's nothing that can replicate being in front of people with your instrument
Mhm.
playing songs from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of learning the pacing of things and kind of understanding the room and the vibe and you know, you
How to play
might
in a room, how to pace a set, all
yeah.
those things. Yeah.
Dealing with somebody might request a tune and if you don't know it, you know, how do you figure out a way to tell them, "Oh, I don't know it, but I know this one." You know
Yeah,
what I'm
exactly.
saying?
We're going back to the beginning of, your journey and your career and stuff. Was there something you learned early on when you were in New York that you understand very differently now when it comes to playing this music?
I think, and I think about this a lot, is that just it all just takes time. And when I look back on any moment, whether it was last week or 10 years ago, that's who you are at that moment. That's how you sound at that moment,
Hmm.
and you could only be your best, you know, right then and there. And I've always tried to like, well, I can't play better than my best. I can only play my best. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, you know, Jeff Tain Watts sounds like this, like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Whatever, think of, example, but like, it's like, yeah, but, look at that's where you are, and the time it takes to get from where I was in, 2012, 2011, when I first moved to New York to now, I'm like 37 years old. I have a 4-year-old daughter, like I'm dealing with this and dealing with that and life and it's all great. And, but those things come as they come. And through that, your playing gets better, your experiences get better, your understanding of things get better. The more you deal with, the more you can kind of compartmentalize like, okay, well, that's all right, that wasn't that great for these reasons. Let me learn from this experience, turn a negative into a positive, et cetera, et cetera. So
I think what happens is we get better as the years go on. So, like, we might be expecting more of ourselves at one point, but we're just better off, and then we expect more. It's just because our musicianship gets elevated the more we do it. So we just expect
yeah.
more.
Yeah, and on the outside of just the playing, because the playing stuff gets better, like, your time and your groove and your sound and your clarity and your dealing with different genres, all that stuff just keeps getting better the more you do it, the more you check it out, the more you look back, the more you look forward. Like all that stuff just gets better with time. So when I think about like my students, it's like, oh, how do I get a better time feel? Like, how do you play an up tempo ride pattern? It's like, it sounds like such a cliche. It sounds like such a cop out, but just keep spending time doing it.
Yeah, I tell
And
all
the
my
more, yeah.
students, I'm like, you have to understand, like, it's just going to take time. There's no other way, like, to tell you this.
Yeah. And my younger students, they say like, well, when did you start playing? When did you start playing drums? And I say, oh, when I was 10 years old. And like, well, I'm 6. I say, great. Well, so when you're the age I am now, you would have been playing the drums much longer than me. And think about just how much more experience and how much more understanding you're gonna then have, So it takes time. But on the outside of the music, just in the you know, the business side of things or the, non-performing side of things, you know, I used to think like, well, how does this person have this gig and this person, like, how do you get those gigs you want? Because everyone has their personal goals and the things that they want to do. And the more you actively seek them, the more you are stepping towards them, right? Um, Lately, I've realized, the the proof of ability is a big thing that I didn't think about too much. So like, to travel with like, travel on the road with like Four Phantoms, which I'm doing a lot of, and playing in these big performing arts centers and dealing with drum writers and dealing with, all kinds of things, sound. Um, you have to know how that all works. And the more you know how it all works, the better you could play, the better you could be off stage, in the van, on the flight, knowing how to get around, knowing how to do all these things. And if you can kind of prove to yourself that you could do it and then prove to the people you work with that you could do it, yeah, you got to play the drums really well. You got to play your instrument really well. But can you do all that stuff the best to your ability with a lot of clarity and a lot of ease, for all the people around you. So then go, okay, yeah, call Steve. He's easy to travel with. He's gonna, prepare his music. He's gonna do this. He's gonna do that. That takes a lot of work to prove to yourself and to kind of understand how that all works, so that you can go and do that for this artist and this artist and this artist.
Yeah, you have to be easy to work with.
Oh yeah.
I think that's like the most important thing. If you're a drag, then, no one's going to want to play with you no matter how good you are.
Yeah, a 90-minute concert is really not as long as the 5-hour drive it takes to get to the next venue. You know
Yeah. The
what I mean?
traveling is what sucks. The music is just the fun part.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. I personally love traveling. It's not easy by any means, it's not easy to wake up at
Yeah.
4 in the morning and leave your family and take two flights to, wherever and do the thing. But there is a lot of freedom and fun and comfort in, you know, oh, the flight's delayed. I didn't delay the flight. It's
Yeah.
not on me. I'm just gonna sit here, I'm just gonna wait. This is a lesson in what else can I do in the meantime and just your overall patience. But
Yeah, it's a lesson
you
in
know,
patience, right?
yeah, like I'm not flying the plane. I'm not, oh, the hotel is an hour away from the airport. Okay.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
just kind of have to go zen on those moments.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
sometimes I do gigs that are like the gig is an hour long, but I have to drive 5 hours to get there. And it's 1 hour and then I have 5 hours back, you
yeah,
know. This and I just have to the only way to survive it is just to go zen. Like this is just what's happening. That's just
yeah. And like, I hear this type of stuff a lot, but it's just like, where are you going? Like, what's the rush? Like, now that I'm a parent, I think about that a lot. Like,
because you have to have patience with it with the
you have to have patience, and man, I want this experience and this, time with my daughter and my family to be as slow as possible. Anytime we fly through something, it's just like, man, look around. Like, this is the event,
yeah.
And so if I
Put
could
your
apply
phone
that to
away,
music
right?
too, huh?
Put your phone
Put your
away,
phone
right?
away, put any other thing you're thinking about, and just the sheer presence of, what a toddler requires of you. Because they'll look at you and be like, we're going, man. Like, and so I try to apply that stuff to
No,
music all
no,
the
it's
time.
so important. Like
Yeah.
like sometimes I get home at 8:30 at night and my wife is home before me and like we have like a couple hours to like to just be with each other and I'm like, all right, we're putting our phones away now.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to lay down the law. Phones are going
Yeah.
away.
No, it's true, man. I mean, it's really true. And I find that on the flip side of that when I'm somewhere either playing or whatever it might be, and someone's just clearly not present, um, it's it's such a drag, it's like, man, we're all trying to make music, we're all trying to have a conversation about whatever, and you're just not there, and so I try to think about that a lot for myself, for
Yeah,
the sake of other people, let alone the mental clarity too, for me.
yeah. Yeah, no, Steve, this has been awesome to catch up, and I know it's been way too
Yeah,
long since we've played. And I hope it'll be rectified sooner than
I'd
later.
love to. I'd love to.
Do you have a way like a car to in the city, or you just
No, no car. I take the train everywhere. I take a lot of Ubers when I need to, and
okay.
I, you know, I
I
rent a car
the
every
next
once in a
time I have
while, but
something in the city, I have to hit you up then, because it's just
yeah. You're out in New Jersey now?
yeah, I'm in Jersey,
Cool.
so
Cool, cool.
but for everyone who's listening, where can everybody find your website and your social media and stuff?
I use Instagram the most. It's a Steve Pick _ drummer. I post everything on there. I have a website too. It's stevepicataggio But Instagram is a little bit of YouTube. Trying to get into the YouTube thing more and more, but for sure
Steve's the
Instagram.
man. If you're a student wanting to learn the drums, go. This is the person you should go seek out. He's the man, and he's very easy to work with. So, Steve, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Abe. This is a real honor. Thank you so much.